All right, so we left off with strings in Python last time, and I mentioned that just like Java, they are immutable. Once you've created them, that you cannot change them. And as proof here, I've got hello world. I assign that as a string value to message. And in C, I could change that first character to capital H like I intended to. But when I try to do this in Python, of course, it gives me an interpreter error when I get to that line, that the string object does not support item assignments, right? That's because they are immutable. You cannot change them. You, of course, can change them if you call a method on them. For example, foo is equal to message dot, what was it called? Capitalize? Alize, if that's how you spell it, right? There we go. And there's my foo message now. There's the message, the original message. And if I capture that foo value there, then it will end up capitalizing the hello world. But they're two different strings in two different memory addresses. So that's a way that you can like deep copy a string if you want to. But again, there's really no point in deep copying strings when they're already immutable, right? You're actually changing them, then you need to store them into a new string. Okay. So there's how you can change. And again, what was it? Python string method functions. I think they like to call them functions even though they're methods. No, they're methods. Okay, whatever. But otherwise, there are a whole bunch of them. For example, what would be most useful? Let's see. What was most useful last year? What would you want to do with a string? I'll ask you. What do you want to do with a string? Substring? Okay. So let's look up find substring. So Python substring. Right. I think it's actually there's not a function to do it. Why? Let's go ahead and remind ourselves. You can sometimes treat them like lists. So if I want it to start at world, what index would that be? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So foo is going to equal to message of 6 all the way to the end, right? And print foo, that'll give me world, right? If you want a substring in a different value, right? If you want 6 up to, 9, remember that it is inclusive exclusive, so it ends up being WOR, right? That starts at 6, 7, 8, but it does not include 9, right? So the exact same syntax that we did before can also be used for subsequences and substrings. I don't actually think that there is a method to do it because they want you to do it the Pythonic way. We've already given this syntax to you. Go ahead and use it, right? But there is find split. Come on, where's split? All right, fine. I'm going to have to search for it. Python split. Right. This is useful because you can split based on, by default, it's going to be white space. But then you can use a splitterator or a splitter. The delimiter is what they should have called it. But remember that you can use this for CSV data. Give me some CSV data here. Let's go ahead and put this over here. All right, so let me go ahead and get rid of all the white space first so that we remember how this works. There we go. There's my information, there's my office, there's my telephone number, my work phone number, and my association is with the School of Computing, right? Oh, I never actually checked the live stream. Yeah, we're good. All right. So I want to split this because I want to process CSV data, right? So I could say CSV data.split. By default, it would split on white space, but I want to split based on commas because this is comma-separated value data, right? So here's data. Now, how do I print out? I'm going to print data because it's actually a list of all of those tokens. Right there we go. Chris, comma. The commas are not retained. They're getting they're gone. But each one of the tokens is retained. And then you've got yourself a list that you can iterate over. You can convert it. You can do whatever you want to it. But otherwise, that's how you can process CSV data. Right? In Java, you can do this using split, but it works on a regular expression. Do you remember regular expressions? I mentioned them in CS1 and say they're really these powerful things that you can use. I even showed you this nice little website, regx101.com or org. Yeah, and you can get things that look like, say, a telephone number, 0 through 9. That's one number. So I want 3 of them, followed by a hyphen, followed by 4 numbers. That looks like a telephone number to me. Let me pull over my CSV data and show that it is actually going to highlight my telephone number there, 472-5008. Right? You can shorthand this, by the way. I want 3 instances, and I want 4 instances. There we go. Right. You can shorthand it for 1 or more instances, or sorry, 0 or more instances, 1 or more instances, or an arbitrary number, for exactly 4 instances, or 4 to 10 instances, right? Something like that. But I want exactly 4 instances here. Sorry, I forgot my 9. There we go. Right? I want a telephone number that begins with, I don't know, 2. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. So 2 followed by 2 numbers, exactly 2 numbers, followed by a hyphen, followed by 4 numbers. Now it's not highlighting my number here at all. Now I mention that because they can be really powerful things, and you should pick up regular expressions on your own at some point, because once you've learned regular expressions and how powerful they are, you'll look back on, there was this data that I had to process, and man, I did a whole bunch of manual labor to get it done. Whereas if I had written a regular expression, it would have been done instantaneously, right? And I mention that because this does not take regular expressions. Instead, what you have to do is you have to create a regular expression. And to do that, you need to bring in the RE library, which is short for regular expression library. And you can create a regular expression using the following. You don't need to create a regular expression. You can now use re.split. So here's my other data, re.split, and I will split, what is it? Here's the token and CSV data, right? So I want to split on anything that is 0 through 9. There we go, 0 through 9. Let's see what that does for us. Right. So it's going to split on that 1, on that 0, on that 5. But are we going to get a bunch of empty tokens in between? Yes, we do, right? So there's Chris Burke, 105. Those are all being treated as delimiters. So I really wish there was a way that I could get out of the way, but we need a different room. I actually asked to be over in the brand new building, but they only let special folks over there or something. I don't know. Anyway, there are 2 empty tokens there. The empty token between the 1 and the 0, empty token between the 0 and the 1, and then likewise, there are a whole bunch of empty tokens over here with my phone number until we get to School of Computing there. What if I wanted to, get that split on any 3 values of, hopefully I can do this. Hopefully, yes, it did. Yeah, it did. It did it on 402, because that was 3 numbers. It did it on 472, and then it did it on 500 and retained the 8 that was not matched. Right? So any regular expression you can write in here and split it. Right? I'll leave that as an example. But let's go ahead and split it again based on any white space. I think it's S plus. So I have normally the regular expression would be \S to match any white space, but I always have to escape backslashes. Right? So it's going to be \S. Plus is 1 or more. And right now I don't have any white. I do have some white space. I have white space right there, and right there. And so it should. Yep, it does. It goes between the 105 and the shore, and then it splits out the School of Computing as well. Right? If I put in a bunch of tabs or end-line characters or what, it would also do the same thing there. It would treat that as white space. If there are multiple, right? Remember it said 1 or more. So if I have a bunch of end-line characters, it'll treat that as 1 delimiter, those 3 together, because I said plus. If I didn't say plus, I would get a completely different result, because it's exactly 1 space character. Right? I'll leave it as plus. But again, we're not expecting regular expressions. We're not expecting you to learn them all on your own or anything like that. I am expecting you to be aware of them, though. And so that when you see somebody, I don't know, This is not Java, sorry, Python. There we go. So when you see somebody like doing a bunch of grunt work, right? Oh, it's taking me 10 hours to do this stuff. They go, oh, good luck with that. And they're like 5 hours into it, and you've gone back to your desk and solved it in 2 minutes. How's that coming along? How's that coming along, right? You still working on that? Right? Well, I did your job for you here. Learn some regular expressions, right? All right, so let's go ahead and get rid of that. All right, what else? So that's strings. Let's talk about functions and modularity, modules in Python, right? Modules are nothing more, or little more, I should say. Come on, go down. Are little more than files, right? You can create a library or module by putting methods or variables or code just in general into a file, right? Call it, let's say, library.py. Everything ends in py. It doesn't have to end in py, but that's the convention. So if I create a library of functions here, all right, let's go ahead and create a, new file library.py, py, right? Well, first of all, we need a function. So we need to talk about functions first. Let's go ahead and define a function. So def, and I'll just call it foo, x, y, and z. Right? And what we'll do is we'll simply say x, or result is equal to x plus y times z. Right? So minus z, make it easier there. Right? It's just a stupid function. You would never write a function like this, first of all, because it's just a one line of code and it's just a plus and a minus. Oh, and think in Java from the last section there. Okay, I've got my function, right? Now, first of all, what I need to, in fact, let's actually do something. I don't know. Let's go ahead and define a distance function, right? Euclidean distance? Distance? That sounds familiar. That's in your assignment. So let's define a Euclidean distance function that takes 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. Right? So the syntax here is def. Hopefully this is big enough for. That's way too big. There we go. Is it big enough for everybody over there? In back, okay. Def is going to be define. You give it a function name, and we follow the same Pythonic rules for variables. It's going to be all lowercase underscore between words. And then we've got our parameters here. We don't write int or double or anything like that because that's not Python. That's a statically typed language thing, right? This is Python. It's just taking 4 arguments. And then we've got a colon here to indicate that that's the beginning of the function, right? With all functions, we are expecting documentation. Now, documentation in Java or C would look like something like this. Documentation. But in Python, guess what? These are not comments. This would be a syntax error, an interpreter error, because it doesn't know what to do with these things. These are C-style syntax, C-style comments. Instead, what we do is we use a string, a multi-line string. And that's why it's three double quotes here. It's going to be multiple lines, right? This function computes the Euclidean distance between the 2 points x1, y1, and x2, y2. You can even codize this a little bit using some markdown. The backticks here put you into code mode. That's a markdown convention. So that if you were to actually write up, produce some documentation in Markdown or PDF or HTML, right? Then these things would appear as code, x1, y1, right? See Wikipedia, right? You can add. It's not. That's going way too far, especially for us. But there's your there's your comments. Okay. Okay. All right. So how do I actually compute that? What is the Euclidean distance function? Square root of x1 minus x2 squared, right? All of this is wrong, by the way, but let's get it in some mathematical form here. Plus y1, y2 difference right? It doesn't matter what the order is, and it doesn't matter about absolute value because you're squaring it, right? And then there's the end of the square root. Can I do just blind square root right there? Nope, math dot square root. And if you're going to do math stuff, what do you have to do? Import math, right? There we go. Now I can do that square root. Can I do those? It looks like I already did that. Okay, there we go. Can I do that caret there? Nope. You could do POW, right? Or good. That's not supported in any C or Python, but it is supported in Python. Or it's not supported in Java or C. It is supported in Python. That is the power. It raises it to the power 2, right? And there is a math.pow if you want it, but this is shorthand. Right? All right. There's still a problem with that. We'll come back to it. But if I just set Python on library, right, it doesn't do anything because it's just a function, right? So let's go over here to my demo, and let's bring in that library function, right? Now that it's in our own library, I can import library, right? And let's go ahead and go with, what's the distance, Euclidean distance of, I don't know, 2, 2 up to 4, 4. Right? What should that be? Oh, is it 2? Okay, thank you. And demo, there we go. All right. Name Euclidean distance is not defined, right? I had to, even if I imported math, I had to still do math dot, right? So I have to do the same thing here. Library dot, right? And now it knows what you're talking about. It's return, none? Right? You said it was 2.8, right? Or something like that? Yeah. All right. Is 2.8 none? No. What's wrong? There's no return statement here. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to return anything. That's a void function. Right? I didn't write void, and void is not a keyword because it's a dynamically typed language. Right? If you're ever getting none, probably the culprit is you forgot a return statement. Pylint, can you help me out? Nope. Library. Come on, library. Right? Trailing new lines, no. Missing module docstring, no. It's not going to complain about all that at all. All it's complaining about is these 2 blank lines. And then I don't have module level documentation. So this would be documentation for the library as a whole. Right? Now Pylint, are you okay with it? Oh yeah, 100%, even though I don't have a return statement. It can't understand that. What did you mean to return something? I don't know. Maybe you meant to have a void function. So it's not going to report that. Return though. Right? And now when I run it on demo, there we go, 2.82, excellent. You did that in your head, good job. All right, so how do I avoid going ... every single time? An alternative here, I'm going to comment this out. An alternative would be, say, from library, import Euclidean distance. I don't want, yeah, you can do star probably, but you want to be more intentional about it, right? We don't like wildcards. There we go. All right, and now I don't have to put a library in front of it. Remember, it's different. It's from the library, import the Euclidean distance. Essentially, you're importing the library into the namespace, but you'd still have to use re dot, pprint dot everywhere. But if you import a particular value in there, that's a little bit more intentional. It's scoped it down, because what if pprint and library both had 2 functions called foo, right? And now you have to disambiguate it by saying pprint.foo, right? But if you import foo from library, then it means that foo, okay? All right, let me add another function, and in fact, let's call it foo, right? X, Y, and Z. And for this one, what am I doing? Right? Indentation matters, remember, right? And so if I say bar is equal to X plus Y, baz is equal to Y plus Z, and then I'll say return bar plus baz, right? If I change that to 2, the return statement is not part of, in fact, it's not even going to let me do it here because it's a syntax error. There are 4 spaces up here. There are 2 spaces over here, or 4 spaces here, 2 spaces there. It's got to be consistent, right? And you should do the Pythonic thing. when I started out with Python, I hated 4 spaces. I still hate 4 spaces. I always wanted 2 spaces because I don't want long lines. I want to preserve my space. But I've come around to, all right, fine, we'll do it the Pythonic way, right? All right, and that'll work, right? All right, let's go ahead and call this function now. Right? Let's go ahead and say, now can I say x here is equal to foo of 10, 20, and 30. Right? What it'll do is I'll add 10 and 20 together. It'll add 20 and 30 together. So 30 and 50. It'll add those 2 things together. It should give me 80, right? Foo is not defined. Remember, I was more intentional, right? If I want to, I can go ahead and go back to import library. Now I can use both of those functions. Or I can have as many of these lines as I want. Import foo, right? Now foo is recognized, right? And it's 80. What if I mashed the keyboard and forgot to provide one of those? Right? I only provide 10 and 20. Right? Remember, it does need Z here because Z is used in this expression right here. Right? I honestly forget what's going to happen, but let's go ahead and roll the dice and see what happens. Okay, type error. You're missing one required positional argument Z. Right? So it'll give me a compiler, but remember, everything worked up to that point. That's the fault with an interpreted language. Your script will run up until it dies, at which point it is a fatal failure. So imagine if you had a script that was doing a whole bunch of data that all of it had to be done or none of it should have been done, right? That means that success, 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 failure, these 3 first successes should have been failures if it fails down here, right? So that's why whenever I write something in Python, I always give myself an out. For example, all the grading scripts I write are in Python, and I have by default it doesn't actually do anything; it just reports what it would have done, and then I run it again with a commit flag to say yes, I am committing my work now, and so then it'll actually do the actual data processing. Right? That approach has saved my neck many times. Right? But otherwise, all right, we'll add back then 30. How do we have 2 foos, though? Could I have 2 foos? What if I wanted a foo that took 3 arguments and a foo that only took 2 arguments and just did something else? Added in 10 instead. Right? I could do that in Java. Could I do that in C? Remember. No, because we do not have function overloading. Right? Java has function overloading. It allows you to have 4 different absolute value functions in the math library. Because when you call it with a double, it means the double function. When you call it with the integer, it means the integer function. That requires static typing. That requires types, integer, double, etc. We don't have types here. There's no way to do this. Let me go ahead and do the library. There we go. All right, fine, I'll type. Python library. Actually, what that's doing is it's overwriting this foo with this foo. And wow, you are not even warning me about that? Thanks a lot, Python. Pylint, will you warn me about that? Not line cache, library. Come on. Oh, it's a perfect score. Wait, no. Disallowed. Okay. It's complaining about my foos and bars and bases. That's funny. But there we go. It is actually complaining of error. Function is already defined on line 13. Right? So what if I were to write a Python my demo there, right? All right, it'll call the last one, right? It'll call this one. What happens when I try to run it with, I want to call the one with 3 arguments. Now it's an error again because this function has been destroyed in favor of the second function. Right? You can't have 2 of these, right? But what you can do is you can have optional arguments, right? There. If you want a default value of 10 for the third one, you can go ahead and say equals 10 here. And what happens now is it becomes an optional argument. And we've seen this before, remember? Range. You could call it with 1 argument, and that'll go give you a value 0 through 9. You could use range 5, 10. That'll give you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can use range of 3 and 10 and 2. That'll give you 3, 5, 7, 9, right? In other words, we've got one function here that we can call in 3 different ways depending on the number of arguments we've given it. Right? And the way that that works is by defining optional arguments here. Right? Now when I call it with 3 arguments, it's going to take 30 as that third argument. When I call it with 2 arguments, it's going to give 10 as a default for that third argument. And they both live happy side by side, 80, 60. Right? Can you make optional arguments on the first one? No. It required, less required, less required, optional. More optional, more optional. That's how it works. Yeah?
What if you passed in strings as arguments to that function?
Good question. Let's go ahead and get rid of that so that it works again. Right? We'll leave that. And we'll say ten. There. Come on, go. When you get into the function, trying to concatenate a string and a number, an integer, you're going to get an error. Right?
If they were all strings?
Good question. 10, foo, 20. Right. So let's walk through it. So it's going to be 10, 20, and then 10. It would fail right here, right? But let's go ahead and pass in 3, 20, and 30. Right? So let's walk through that. It's going to concatenate the words 10 and 20. It's going to concatenate 20 and 30. Then it's going to concatenate them all together, right? 10, 20, 20, 30. Right? Gross. Right? But you see the consequences of a dynamically typed language. You could do type checking, right? You could say if, what is it, type of x is not equal to integer, right? No, Python type of. Oh, it is, okay. Is int? Integer, right?
I thought it was like dot is digit.
Python type function. Okay, it's if it's not an integer, then what should we do? Print error and then also exit on them. You could exit if you want to. It's not a good practice to do that, but there we go. Not integer. Is it int or is it number? Int. Okay. There we go. Error. Right. If it's, I think that you could do number too, and then that captures both floats and integers. Number? No, it's not. All right. Yeah, I disabled my ad blocker, sure. Is digit, is it? Okay.
It was like x dot is digit.
Ah, okay. X dot is, that sounds like it's you're assuming that it's a string though, isn't it? You want to know if it's a string or not, right? But yeah, you could do type. That I don't even want to do that, right? I want to use a statically typed language. Yeah.
So, you were passing in 30 with the string 30 for
Mhm.
C, right?
Yeah.
You were setting it as a 10 in the method itself, like in the parameters?
No, that's the default value. Once you provide it, the default will not be provided. This is like a lawyer, right? If you don't have one will be provided for you. But if you provide one, that's your lawyer. That's your value.
After we set it, so that's still the 10.
Yeah, it's only for the purposes of that function call, right? It does not change anything. In fact, there is no functions modules. There is no call by reference, right? In other words, there are no pointers. Right? Let me show you. Let me show you. For example, after we've computed bar and baz, let me go ahead and try to change x to -42, right? And let's see if that was changed. Well, there's no variable here. Let me go ahead and give a variable. Y is equal to that, and then I'll pass in y, and then print y. Y will be unchanged here, right? It's still ten. You can't change variables because there's no pass by reference. Good question here, though. What if you did a sum function? Sum of a list of numbers, right? So there's already a sum. I get the sum of it, right? Because I think that there's already a sum function. result is equal to sum of list. There we go. And I'll return the result. But if I try to change it, list dot add 42. Right? Can I change lists in a function? Let's find out. So I can import get sum, and then I will need a list here of foo 10, 20, and 30. I want it to sum all those numbers, so get sum of foo, and then pprint foo. I don't really care about the value, but I'll say total is equal to. All right, so if it's changeable, if it's mutable in that function, then we should have negative 42, 20, and 30, or add 42. There we go. All right, good. Foo. Yes, you do. Oh, append. Sorry. Append. There. There. It was 42, not negative 42. What does that tell you?
Variables fine. That's by reference to this.
Bingo. Variables are not passed by reference, but lists, sets, not tuples, and maps are passed by reference, because otherwise it would have to copy the entire list to that function. Right? That's in contrast to PHP. A few years, even as a few years ago, the third programming language that we did was not Python; it was PHP, and PHP is damn ugly. It is passed by value for collections. In other words, you are copying all this crap onto the stack and risking a stack overflow. But then they also have pass by reference, so you can change it by putting an ampersand in front of it, which is exactly the opposite of C, and that's why it's that's just the tip of the iceberg for why PHP is such a terrible language. In fact, there's a website for it, PHP Sadness. Right there, PHP Sadness. Right. That's the same guy that does. I think he does. I think this is the same guy as the Advent of Code, but don't quote me on that. I forget who it was. But there are these weird things in PHP because it's a terrible, terrible language. Every language is going to have some warts to it, but whatever. Right? So there's. I'm going to put that into the. Not Python, but I'm going to put that into the notes in two different separate files. So this one will be library.py, and then here's the demo that uses that library. So demo.py. Right? All right, and there's how you import stuff. For our purposes, you can go ahead and turn in as many Python files as you want. You can separate them out. But for this first assignment, everything is simple enough that you're probably going to return in one file, right? And the main function or the main script has to be in those file names, right? But you can start making your own libraries if you really want to. Yeah.
So with like the function definition, like right next to like the parentheses, you put like an arrow and say like int or something. Is that something that you could return to me?
Well, that is a static add-on that is ignored by the interpreter. No, that's not the correct. What is the correct syntax?
That was
Yeah, you would. It's complicated. There are folks that have tried to advocate more static typing for Python, and so they've added this stuff on, and whether or not it tries to be backwards compatible. I forget the actual syntax, but you can basically give it hints that this should be an integer. And now, when somebody actually runs the interpreter, a warning will probably be executed and say, they really wanted you to give an integer, but you didn't. I guess you know what you're doing, but I'm warning you about it. At the end of the day, it's still not enforced, I don't think, unless you maybe manipulate the settings of your interpreter and say, I want absolute enforcement of this. And I forget what it was called, too, Python static variables. What? No, that's not static typed variables. How to make Python statically typed, right? 404. There we go. I forget what the tool was called, but it's type hinting and static typing. You can read all about it there. Type hinting and static typing is what you would want to look up. Most dynamic programming languages have something like this. For example, JavaScript is dynamically typed, but there are folks that don't like that, and so they introduce CoffeeScript, right? Or that's Microsoft. There's what other, I forget. There are a whole bunch of others that everybody wants to do their own thing, but you're adding static typing on top of a dynamically typed language to basically solve these problems of what happens when somebody gives me a string and I don't want a string, right? Okay. So yeah, good questions, and that gets way deeper than we need to get to do what we're trying to do here, right? But great questions, because I ask those questions all the time too, right? So basic file I/O, right? So you can write to a file using, guess what? Open. Right? You're opening a file. Actually, I should say that you can open a file. Open a file, very similar to fopen in C. Right? So here's an example. I'm going to go back to demo over here. And this is all in the notes, so I can get rid of it. Let's go ahead and open my text file. Data.txt. I don't have that file yet, but we'll open it for the purposes of writing, because we're going to do file output. Right? Look familiar? It's basically fopen without the F in front of it. It returns a file handle, right? F is a file handle that points to the file, right? Now, if that file does not already exist, it will be created for you as long as you have permissions to do it, right? And then you can start writing to it, f.write. And the easiest way to write to this is just to use strings. Hello world. World. Right? I forget whether or not it does n-line characters for you. Actually, no, I remember now, but we'll find out when we actually dump this to a file. Write. Use f strings if you want to put output values. So x is equal to 42. You can use f strings on multiple things. So x, comma, y. Let's go 0.2 f on y. There we go. And I don't know, z. Let's go with y is equal to 3.14159. And let's go z is equal to hello world. No, me. There we go. All right. And once you're done writing to the file, what should you do? Close it, but f close, right? And that's good. So let's run demo here. It ran, no output, but that's because it was writing to a file. It's not over here. Do you remember what you have to do in the CS50 IDE when it creates stuff in the background? Sometimes you have to give it a kick in the butt and refresh it. And there's our data.txt file. Does it insert n-line characters for you? Nope. So let's go back and insert n-line characters there, there, and there to make it pretty. Right. Now when I do that, it's not going to append. It's going to wipe out the original file and replace everything. So careful. Same thing with fopen for write or whatever you're using in C and Java. If you just start writing to a file, it starts at the beginning, overwrites any data that's there. Right? In fact, if I add a whole bunch of other data here, right, it's not just going to rewrite the first portion. Right? It's going to rewrite everything, right? Because you closed it at that point. All the old data is gone. Right? So again, if you screw up and go my demo file.py here, you're going to end up overwriting yourself. Right? Don't do that. Right? Okay. But there is file output. No libraries are required for this. It's just part of the language. Right? But it's similar to fopen. Right? Here's output. And 1, 2, 3, Python. There we go. What about input? Okay. Now there are a couple of shortcuts here, but I'll show you the most useful shortcut. We do need a data file here. Let me rewrite this to line 1, line 2, line 3, A, comma B, comma C, comma D, and line 5. A whole bunch of empty lines there. Let's see if that works. Okay. Anyway, to open up a file, same thing as before, open data.txt, but not for the purposes of writing, and, instead for the purposes of reading, right? And now I don't want to go line by line. I just want to dump everything to a string. So lines is equal to f dot read lines. Right? Now all the lines have been read in all at once. Let me show you pprint.pprint lines. Right? Right. There's all the lines. What do those \n's tell you? N-line characters are retained. So input read lines retains end line character. It retains end line characters. I want to get rid of them. Is there an easy way?
Regular expression.
Oh, I could do a regular expression, or I could do that other really cool thing, comprehension, right? Because I could always go rstrip. That'll strip out any trailing white space on the right side. There is an lstrip, which is trimming out any white space on the left side. Right? But I want rstrip. I could go for each line, right? Rstrip it, right? Or what I could do is a list comprehension. Lines without the end line character. A new list here of what would it be? Line.rstrip, right? For line in lines. Right? Now let's print out lines again. All the inline characters are gone. Right? I didn't have to write, technically I wrote a loop here, but I used a comprehension. I didn't have to create something new. Right? I stripped it down to just one line. Right? Okay. All right. What about all those trailing empty lines? Those are also retained, right? So trailing empty lines are retained. Right? So let's get rid of those now. Right? How could I add another condition on this? For line in lines, if line is not empty somehow. So Python empty string. Well, if it were a purely empty string, you could do this if not line, right? Because an empty string is false, a non-empty string is true. This will, yeah. So if line, all right, there we go, right there. But it's still retaining those empty ones. Why? Because they weren't actually empty. They had an end line character in there, right? So we can change that if length of the line is greater than 1, right? There. Now it got rid of all those empty lines. Another way that you could have done this is there's probably a string function. There's a string function to see if it's empty, or it's just white space. Is white space or something. Python string is only white space. You could go with a regular expression, of course. It contains only white space. Is space. There we go. Right. So if line dot is space. Right. If not, because I want the opposite. There we go. There's another way. And that would save you from, if it's a truly empty line with somebody put in like 5 spaces and then an end line character, that's not real data either. Right. So there's a nice way of stripping things out. You've stripped out the trailing white space. You've stripped out the trailing empty lines, and it's all good, right? Python. But otherwise, now you can go ahead and process it line by line by line if you need to. Right? Yeah. Let me go ahead and give you an example. All right. So let me go ahead and create a new. Come on, new. This will look familiar. Books.csv. Right. Let's do that again. Right. So let me go ahead and start by just processing that file. Books.csv. Right. For reading. Read all those lines. Well, one problem is I could have a bunch of trailing empty lines. So if I just do that, then I'll have the lines. Right. There we go. Except that, I don't want that first line because it's a bunch of headers. All right. So for line in lines. How could I skip the first one? By starting at 1 and going all the way to the end. That gets rid of the first line, right? And now I've got each line is going to be one CSV data point. Now I want my actual data here. Data is equal to, let's go ahead and create a list of books, right? And what I'll do is I'll say remember split. We're going to split based on commas here for line in lines. Now let's print out that data instead of the lines. I don't care about the lines anymore, but I'll leave that in case you want it in the notes. There we go. Nope, sorry. Data. Data, thank you. There. Now I've got Wild Robot Protects, Life and Universe of Everything, right? I've got all of those pieces of data split out. This is a list of lists, though. Right? That's not very satisfying. Right? I could do whatever I wanted with it. I could say get all of the ratings. The ratings is going to be the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So ratings is equal to data dat. So 5 for dat in data. Right, there we go. And then let's print all of the ratings. So I've isolated all the ratings, but they're all strings. So let's go ahead and float around that. And now I've got a list of all of the ratings as numbers. And then I can find the max. Best is equal to max of ratings. And what's the best in this case? Well, it's going to be 4.24, but that doesn't tell me what the book is, right? So how would we approach this in C or Java? Make a class in Java. In C, we don't have classes in C, we have structures. I want to do the same thing here. Very, very briefly, how would you go about doing it? Well, because we'll continue it next time. New file, book.py, right? Now that we know modules, I want a class that represents a book. So class, book. Right? And I can start and here's my documentation. Represents a book, right? Well, what about all your variables? If this were Java, I would say int ISBN, right? Int title, right? But there are no integers. Instead, it's just ISBN title, right? Except that, what's the point of declaring something if you're not going to set it, right? You don't even have to declare your variables here. Right? Instead, what you do is you need a way to create a book. And that's going to be init a constructor. Do we remember constructors in Java? It has the same name. It would be like public book, and then you give it the elements, the values that you want to set that book to. Here, it's going to be very different. It's going to be what do we have? Self, ID, title, last, first. That's the author, ISBN, rating, and year. Right? That was all the data. This is my constructor in Python. Underscore, underscore. That's what's called a magic method, or something. I think that they call it magic methods. PHP calls them magic methods. They're built into the language with default behavior until you redefine them to have the behavior you want. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say self.id is equal to ID, self.title is equal to title, et cetera, and I'll complete that on my own there. But that's how you can create a constructor. It's a function that's called init with 2 underscores on each end. And then we've got this new keyword here. In Java, what did we use? This. In Python, we use self. Right? So we're kind of anthropomorphizing our Python code here. Right? It's no longer an object, it's a person, it's self. Right? Weird. Right? But that's Python for you. All right, I'll see you on Friday, and we'll take it from there.